Hi, it's Mark from Top Local. We're here with Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. We're doing the Pawlik Automotive podcast this morning. How you doing, Bernie?
Doing very well, Mark.
So we're going to talk about a diesel, an ML320 Mercedes-Benz. There was a problem with the intake manifold. What was going on with this fine German automobile?
Well, what was going on with this? I won't try the German, but what was going on with this vehicle is it came to our shop with a massive oil leak, which we diagnosed to be coming from a couple of spots, the rear crankshaft seal and also the engine oil cooler seals. Now, the engine oil cooler seals are located in the valley, right at it's a V6 engine, so the valley is the section between the two cylinder banks. The oil cooler is located right in the very bottom. And there's a lot of items that need to be removed to get at the oil cooler, such as the intake manifolds being among them.
So if it came in with an oil leak, again, I guess, why are we talking about intake manifolds?
Well, we're talking about intake manifolds because there's a actuator in the intake manifolds that causes problems. They have two. An actuator that moves a flap back and forth inside each intake runner, and it can vary the size of the intake or the intake port size, and it's tuned for basically different running conditions. So at certain speeds, you want different kinds of flow through the intake manifold for performance. And this intake runner, these things plug up, they wear out, and I'm going to put a video on which we can look at right now, which will explain it almost better than my my discussion here. So we'll start with the video of the bad runner. Now you can see this, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll start the video. So this is the very close-up view of the intake manifold port. There's one port that flows continuously and one that gets blocked off with this actuator flap. And you'll notice in this area here, there's a lot of play in these plastic moving arms. So we'll just fire it up right now and you can see. You notice here, there's an incredible amount of movement.
Wobbling around pretty good.
Yeah, wobbles around. And if you look at these two different ports, you'll see that one of them is moving and the other one isn't even moving. So there's a lot of slop in this piece here. You'll also notice there's a lot of gunk inside that passage, all the passageways. And that's stuff that really needs to be cleaned out. I'll just play the video one more time so you can kind of have another good look at it. So this is why we're talking about the intake manifolds. We're talking about these intake manifold runners. They sometimes call them swirl valves, variable intake actuators. I can't think of all the names. Different manufacturers use different names, but there's a motor that actually operates it. The computer sends a signal. The motor moves the valves, and that's what makes it go.
And so that would affect the performance and economy of the vehicle?
Absolutely. It does make a difference. And with those blocked ports as well, it makes a difference. So I'll just show you. This is the new manifold. You can see the arms moving. You can see how clean this is too. I mean, imagine how much more air is actually flowing through the engine with it set up like this. I'll run it again. Again, there's no play in any of these rods. They're all moving exactly at the same speed, the same time.
Very nice. Back to you.
Yeah, makes a big difference with it all clean.
So then do you then end up obviously changing the manifolds just for an oil leak?
We did. Well, we did it while we were in there because the manifolds have to be removed to get at the oil leak to access the oil cooler. So it kind of makes sense to change them while it's all out because there's no extra labor charge. I mean, the parts are expensive, no doubt, and it's kind of a shame to toss away what's a perfectly good manifold, but that's the way they manufacture them. It doesn't leave any option to replace those rods or linkage pieces. You have to change the whole manifold. And one of them comes with the actuator motor. And this is an item that also had some oil had soaked the motor, and that's a failure item on these engines as well. So, this is a bit of preventative maintenance for future issues.
And was it just a gasket issue, or what was actually leaking on the oil cooler?
The oil cooler seals leak, so it's where the oil cooler meets the engine block. There's two rubber seals, and they harden up and leak after a while. And it was leaking a horrific amount of oil after we diagnosed it, cleaned it. There was a lot of oil coming out after 10 minutes of driving. This little small puddle forming on the ground. So there's a lot of oil that can leak out.
So does it need to be this complex?
It does. And actually, just before we talk about the complexity, I was going to say on the manifolds, it's interesting because the 2008 is the last year that Mercedes made these where there isn't a switch on the end of those actuator rods. 2009 and newer, they put a little micro switch on the end of each rod. So when the motor moves the linkage, if it doesn't move far enough, it will actually cause your check engine light to come on, set a trouble code. So you're really at that point forced to change the intake manifolds. On these older ones, you don't actually have to change it. I mean, if it's broken, as long as the motor moves, the computer thinks it's working. So they made it a little more complex in newer models. So you can actually get away with not changing them. But in the case, there's still an effect on the performance. So it's best to do it. But the question about the complexity, does it need to be this complex? I'd say, yes, it does in this modern era. I mean, at one time, diesels were simple, reliable, mostly reliable. Some weren't as good as others, but find like a lot of older German diesels, Volkswagens, Mercedes. They're very reliable diesel engines, and a lot of the older American trucks, they just you turn the key, they start. You didn't have to do a whole lot to them, but they stunk, and they put out some horrific pollutants into the air, a lot of smoke. And the nice thing about these diesels is you don't see a lot of smoke. They don't smell so bad, even though they don't. They're not as clean as advertised, as we all know, but they do make, it does make a difference. So I'd say, yes, unfortunately, it does need to be this complicated if we want to have cleaner air, fuel economy, and performance.
So there you go. If you're looking for service on your ML320 or any Mercedes-Benz diesel product in Vancouver, the guys to see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112 to book your appointment. You have to book ahead. They're busy. Or check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com. Lots and lots of information on there. Hundreds of articles on all different types and models of problems and cars and trucks, or our YouTube channel, Pawlik Auto Repair, or our lovely new podcast. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.